There's no woman who lives in the shoe. She had so many children, she didn't know what to do. She gave them some broth without any bread, whipped them all soundly and put them to bed. Hey, do, cat in the fiddle, cat jump over the moat. The little dog laughed to see such a sport, and dish ran away with a spoon. Oh, little Miss Muffet sat on a tuffet, eating her touch cotton way. There came big spiders and down beside her, and Friday Miss Muffet away. Little boy, blue come blow your love. Sheep's in the meadow and the cows in the court. Where is that boy who looks after the sheep? He lies in the haystack, fast asleep. Oh, little Miss Muffet sat on a tuffet. Oh, eating her cousin way. There came down beside us, sat down big spider, and Friday Miss Muffet away. Gotta quit that. For practical purposes, water is incompressible, so the submerged crown would displace an amount of water equal and rise up flat to its own volume to be measured. It's a principle. And for them to take this and turn it into something else out of architecture. So certain things heavier in gold, but the thing is it would rise up flat. See that? Archimedes. And then he was telling you who he's talking to. And by seeing something move up, or if something is a sphere or a cylinder, to do the math to make Greek architecture, after and knowing that levels are flat, and for your tomb to be found later by Cicero to discover the tomb of Archimedes. So just like Hiram, not the king, but the builder king, this says 287, 212 BC, was a Greek mathematician, Syracuse, Sicily. Archimedes. or the supper, the banquet, Thessalia. Suggests the figures wearing the clothing, and the middle figure is leading a religious ceremony or funeral banquet. A funeral banquet. This would imply that women played a larger role in the early church than previously assumed. A funeral banquet. The long, cool woman in a red dress. Says the inscription cited as evidence of the following in the 2nd century. The importance of the Church of Rome. No, only because of the woman in the red dress. And then a bunch of practices and things and stuff. The inscription. Long, cool woman in a red dress. And then sometime they tried to prove that the engraving of Aloof was a priest of the mother goddess Sybil. By saying that Albericus had been a priest at Attis, Greek certainly, and prior to the year 216. As it reads, "And to Rome he sent me to contemplate majesty, and to see a queen, golden robed and golden sandaled. The importance of the long, cool woman in the red dress. And some of them always bore the title dolphin. Dolphin, the name of a fish. What is more, a royal fish. Like a king, now the name royal fish used to be given to the dolphin. The Greek ancestor Ichthus, called by others Roman catacombs, has the same origin. Manumission of a slave. Regards the prohibition, considering as outside of the Holy Land, and a Samaritan was considered a Gentile. And people would use several papers to combine paper, but like Smicus, as well as Aquila and the Theodosian, to come up with things, writing in a hexapla to put things together. You use manuscripts. But Archimedes lived, according to some, before his death in 212. "75 years before his death, the sand reckoner, the time, the sand reckoner. Father's name is Phidias. Their biography is written Heraclides in the Greek. The Ephesus theater and libraries get burned, tore up, but this work has been lost. And when Cicero found the tomb and cleaned it up and read about it, he mentions Marcellus brought to Rome the planetariums Archimedes built. So Plutarch wrote, the lives of Archimedes was related to King Hero II, ruler of Syracuse. And just by confessing that he said, "Do not disturb my circles," as his last words, they'll say, oh, he probably didn't say that. Well, what's the significance of that even being discussed? And aside from creating weapons and heat ray guns with mirrors, it reminds me, what's the first person that discovers magnetism? They got this rock floating. It's a magnet. And they're like, well, that's pretty cool. And they got a magnet. The magnet is sitting over there, and it's just floating. But Archimedes, aside from the weapons and the heat ray mirror, possible like a laser coming off a ship, he understood equal of the water laying flat, of planes, to come up with using leverage on something that's always going to be flat. And where the moon follows the sun, no matter how you flip it around, the same way. He said, give me a place to stand on, and I will move the earth. By his discovery of water, motionless, and on the equilibrium of plane, so much so that no matter how you flipped it around, it was always ticking the same way that he made mention of in clock movements, showing motions and devices that kept time in synchrony with earth movements and time. Mechanisms. And he also said to take him back to Rome 2 other mechanisms, as along with planetariums. Archimedes, taken to Rome twice. Before his reckoner, he was also set out to calculate the number of grains of sand that's all over the universe, meaning it could be counted. But he challenged that notion that the number of the grains of sand was too large to be counted. They said it was infinite. They said it couldn't be counted. He said that it was. It had its limits. It could be counted. And he laughed and he said, there's some, King Galo, even in his family, who think that the number of the sand is infinite. That it's like this thing that goes on in a spiral. And I mean that the sand not only which exists, but everything. Not just our vicinity, but they think that the whole thing is just goes on forever. But there are boundaries, and it can be counted. See, Archimedean property has been brought back to Rome 2 or 3 times and more. And the thing about it, when he's writing about architecture, he's writing about architecture. When he's writing about astronomy, he's writing about astronomy and making clocks, because it stays consistent. And he can measure it because everything's going to rise level. But then they'll talk, and then when he's talking about architecture, because he made the beautiful arches, he postulates that any magnitude, when added to itself enough times, will exceed any given magnitude. And if somebody wants to neglect what he just said, yeah, it's like if it's when added to itself enough times will exceed any given magnitude. Well, up until the last grain of sand, because he already said it when it comes to certain things, it can be measured. He challenged that the universe wasn't immeasurable. And they'll call this the academic property. They'll even put a name on it. And they'll talk about square roots and this and that. And dismiss, wait. Before you know it, you'll be thinking he's somebody he's not. Which will bring us to Plato. There's even been remarks as if it were of set purpose to have covered up the traces of his investigation, as if he had grudged posterity the secret of his method of inquiry, while he wished to extort from them assets to his results. There are no more priests than the fictions they worship are gods. Still, he thought as he watched the priests work methodically, their power's great. And if something, discovering of a magnet, that would be cool. Have a illuminating light. And what appeared to be an altar with metals and bronze bands, tall, and a floating device. Yeah, Archimedes said when Gallus moved the globe, and he laughed. It happened that the moon followed the sun. He tried to say that it wasn't going to stay the same, and my instruments would mess up. And even when he tried to move it, the moon and the sun, it stayed the same. That bronze contrivance as the sky itself, which also is in the sky, the sun's surrounding the sphere around the sun and everything it sees. Not like just in the land, but everything it sees. In its sphere became to have the same. And the moon came then to that position, which was at its shadow. It all stayed the same, whether that way, and if you moved it that way, on the earth, when the sun was in line to begin with. But yet, they'll deny and try to not just stick with what he said. So for our solstice banquet night, Ptolemy, quoting Hipparchus, also references Archimedes' solstice observations in the Almagest. This would make Archimedes the first known Greek to have recorded multiple solstice days and times in successive years. He'd already been doing it. And architecture. And they found his tomb. And he's mentioned being dug up by Cicero. Arbicus saw a holy virgin drew with her hands from a fountain, and thus forever gives to its friends to eat, it having wine of great fortune. Long cool woman in the red dress, and Liber Assumptorum by the philosopher. Well, I just want to talk about 2 or 3 things. We have to do about 6, 7 words. We got to do 6 or 7 words. In all these questions, it is necessary to seek a motive. I have no personal interest in defending the Jesuits, but I ask, what motive could the Jesuits have in forming, supporting conspiracy directed against all thrones and altars? Well, it's not just what the Jesuits have to gain. It's what any group has to gain by having dominant over everybody. Any group. Any group. That's why we keep that separated. It says, in the view, though, this guy, new and revised, there's a theory given, originated from certain places, which are well known in history as the Roman College of Artificers. The Roman College is what they're saying. The guilds have come from the Roman College of Architecture. You see, he says there is no foundation of fact for such a theory. But the working knowledge is that it comes from Roman College of Architecture. And then someone will respond and say, oh, if it didn't come from Rome, they say, well, yeah. So he's saying that it came from Egypt, Assyria, and India, and Persia. But it doesn't show that. You see, the person rebutting it is implying that Egypt, Assyria, India, Persia, Mesopotamia, all of that, that's the only place it could come from. So he's already not fully because he didn't say that. He just said it didn't come from Rome. It's not the originator. And they'll go on and saying, well, he must have said it come from these other 4 places, but he didn't. He just said it didn't come from Rome. So this guy's implying that'd be the place it would come. He's already putting things in perspective for a response. But he talks about, though there's some reference maybe to Egypt or Phoenicia, and then secret teachings of Pythagoras, Euclid, or Plato, and things. But there's words in them that are Judaic. And then the author strikes out, because third time, not only it's not innocent ignorance. Whether it's innocent ignorance or not, it's ignorance. It says, thus also some portion, which should have been mentioned up there with Egypt and Persia or at the beginning, which means it's on his mind, which means it was discussed possibly by Churchward and saying it didn't come from Rome. Thus also some portion may have penetrated to Britain through people versed in the lore of Greece throughout Egypt. It's like this guy. This is most obvious in the animals, other than man. They make things neither by art, nor after inquiry or deliberation. See, the ant, when it goes about, something's taken over it. And they see, that's why people wonder whether it's intelligence or by some other faculty when they're working. The webs. I can tell you, a rambling wreck from Georgia Tech and a hell of an engineer. Look at just what helped me remember. A yellow jacket's nest. Tear one of those things up and look at them. Ants. Oh, I had some fresh honey earlier. It's absurd to suppose that purpose is not present because we do not observe the agent. See, there's something creating it. What's interesting is what he said. He said, they label stuff with stuff they don't say, but this is something he said. He said, nothing can create. Nothing can come from nothing. That means it has to come from something, though. That means there is a something. See? That's basically all it is. Just reword what they say and be like, okay, they just don't know how to word things. It's absurd to suppose that purpose is not present because we do not observe the agent deliberating. Art does not deliberate. It takes something. It takes a mover. It takes a mover. A supernatural act. Something other in control. A creator. A something. If the shipbuilding art were in the wood, see, you don't just grow a ship. You don't just put it in there and it grows up. You're growing a ship, yeah. No, it takes something acting. It takes the supernatural. It takes something behind it. It would produce the same results by nature. See, it don't. You can't plant it and it come up natural and have a ship. It takes something. Purpose is present in art. It shows a creation. And it's present also in nature. It shows a thing. Shows a thing. And then, if they leave it at that, that'd be one thing. But here I have to just interject and throw in my other definition. Because they don't. They're rascals, what they are. And that's the thing. You could spend, somebody could spend all day and never put the microphone down. Because I can find 3 lies in one half paragraph. You could say it's not a lie, it's just an innocent ignorance. But then after a while, it's like, all right, but if I get 3 of them real fast, you're already on the agenda, whether it's innocent ignorance or not. But you can still learn from them. According to Aristotle, so they say from this, a seed has the eventual adult plant and its end. No, he didn't. He said that it took to something else. Because you can't just plant a tree. You can't just plant a ship. See, right off the bat. Right off the bat. If and only if the seed will become a plant under normal circumstances. Well, see, we're talking about something growing now. See, you're not even talking about that. But what's interesting, this is what I want to remember. He even wrote some arguments about the phenomenon, the supernatural. The end result is more important than the others. He argues for the end is that which brings it about. The creator. The something. And it's a supernatural, whether it's an ant or whether it's an art. You do it. If one defines the operation of sawing as being a certain kind of dividing, then this cannot come about unless the saw has teeth of a certain kind. Well, that's fence post riding. Thing is, right off the top, he said you can't plant a ship. Retaining them as male soprani, as the Italians, with their usual lack of Christian reticence about sex, called them the castrati. They were in every opera in the 18th century, but foreign visitors were never reconciled to them. The famous English weekly The Spectator wrote about the shrill celestial whine of eunuchs, and by the end of the 18th century began to fade out of the opera house. But as the word celestial indicates, they were found also in the choir of all churches that were proud of their music, particularly in the chapel of the Vatican Palace, the Sistine Chapel, one of the greatest shrines of art as well as virtue of piety in Rome. And the church clung to their eunuchs when public opinion almost drove them out of the opera. The plea seems to have been there was some indelicacy or risk of it in having females in the church choir. So the priest chose to ignore rather delicate nature of the operation of emasculation. The fact was well known as the celibacy of the clergy, Grovel's Standard, Dictionary of Music and Musicians, in 1927 says in the section titled Castrati. Eunuchs were in vogue as singers until comparatively recent times. They were employed in the choirs of Rome. So Macmillan's and other leading dictionaries in English and American visitors to Rome before 1870 who wrote books rarely failed to mention, with smirks of rumor, frowns of piety, how the beautiful music, the papal choir boys, due to large part to manufactured soprani. In 1928, the Westminster Catholic Federation, which corresponds to the Catholic Welfare Organization in America, made this boast about its annual report. The revision of the Encyclopedia Britannica is undertaken with a view to eliminate matter with the objectionable from a Catholic point of view. The 1928 Encyclopedia Britannica, even more vile as being practiced by a civilized European nation, was the Italian practice of castrating boys to prevent the natural development of the voice, in order to train them as opera soprano singers, such as might formerly be found in Sistine Chapel. Though such mutilation is a crime punishable with severity, the supply of soprano never failed as long as these musical powers were in demand in high quarters. Driven long ago from the Italian stage by public opinion, they remained the musical glory of the moral shame of the papal choir till the accession of Pope Leo XII, one of whose first acts was to get rid of them. The Italian practice of castrating boys in order to train them as adult soprano singers was spoken against by Pope XIII. And in the old notice, a different procedure is found with Alban. Now stated, usually styled a proto-martyr of Britain. Added now, but it is impossible to determine in the encyclopedia. And adds it things. And we pass to Albertus Magnus. Now the encyclopedia reads, instead of Albert the Great. Possibly the epitaph is less offensive to the eye in Latin. The original writer had never properly informed the reader, says, Albert was so much indebted to Aristotle for his science that he was known to Catholic contemporaries as the ape of Aristotle, and that he was apt to be so inaccurate, they say, that he described Plato as a Stoic. Albert the Great. The article Aboriginals is one a modern student would expect them to replace the conventional old article by one line. Instead, we get a page article reduced to half page, and this is done chiefly by cutting 25 lines, which the older ones said explained the Pope turned the brutal Knights of France upon the Albigensians only when 20 years preaching failed to make the least impression on them. And 10 lines of what vast inquest of the Inquisition were still needed after years of slaughter by the Pope's savage crusaders. We therefore recognize the anointed hand of the abbreviator, and it is clear that the editor or sub-editor cheated the public out of the most important truth by entrusting this article to Catholic correctors, reckoning of times and sands of dates and discipline. We now fully recognize the importance from the angle of this history of civilization, of this brilliant but anti-Christian little civilization in the south of France, close to Arab Spain. Yeah, look at those hats. They're carrying baskets on their heads from the garden back. What's wrong with that? I like these hats. In the ship's company of the Argo, the Lacedaemonians received people. It was then that Theris interceded, promising lands to people, and in that land of the Lacedaemonians, says the actual colonization of Cyrene proceeded from Thera, renamed the island and called it Thera after himself. Sends you to found a city in Libya. It is told, after founding the city, it's the story of the deaf by being dumb, not being able to talk, mute, become king, and the long cool woman in the red dress. Not being able to talk, he would stammer, and when he saw a lion, he could not help crying out in a clear and loud voice, who became king of Cyrene. The king of Cyrene. And the priestess of Peneus. The Peneus princess and and the ANastylosis Lésbos Nymphs, the Dithyramb assholes. I really just wanted to talk about the priestess Peneus pollinating familiares. You know, that's the Acts of Senate. Compare yourself to the ant, O sluggard, and imitate her ways. Be wiser than she. So Hyrcanus, he'd opened a tomb and built bridges and all, past other kings, drawn out of silver, and he made friendly alliance with Antiochus, and admitted him into the city, lavishly and generously supplied his army with all they needed. As soon as Antiochus passed, Hyrcanus marched out against the city of Syria. Now Hyrcanus wished to renew a friendship with the Romans. He sent embassy to them. The Senate received his letter and made alliance of friendship with them. Apollonius, the son of Alexander, and Diodorus, the son of Jason, one Jason. It is certain, at all events, that Jews lived in Transylvania soon after the country had become a part of Dacia during the Roman Empire. Greeks, and likewise Jews, might not engage in trade, except in places especially assigned them for residence. Anastylosis, Lésbos, Nymphs. It's an architectural conservation term for a reconstruction technique whereby ruins of buildings or monuments are re-erected using the original architectural elements. Anastylosis. Cicero found Archimedes' tomb. Got Archimedes, got Plato, got Aristotle, and they all say something ain't so. Here's over here. They started this and started again at the turn of the century 1900. They stopped it. But Cyrene. and they shake that asp. Assholes come out at night. However, it should be noted as a historical anecdote that both Christians and their Muslim enemies decided for some reason to sanctify Jerusalem and not another place. Once it's out of the bag, they call it the cat door. It's the cat door. When the women sing, the angels, it doesn't mention the place. In the traditional Masoretic, just a reminder, certain things, Bethel, there are known differences. And opposite Gilgal, beside the oaks of Moriah. And if you're lucky, somebody will come and they'll say, "You're a heretic." That's what they say, see? No matter what you say. Then you say, all right. And the binding of Jacob, and they say, this is heresy. I like it. See, it's good when they fight. To get around to changing some things, but the oldest, it didn't take up the chronology though. The old Vedic Latin Bible, which was early, before the Vulgate, also says. That doesn't mean that the rest of it, that just means that didn't get taken out first, because it's still in the old one. But Jerome and his Masoretic, the old Latin Vedas, used by Catholic Church, before Jerome's, before the Vulgate, also says Gerizim. And they can call it a Kuthian origin story. In fragments, an old Latin preserved, found. Then after dealing with Tyre, Alexander moved to Gaza. Before these sieges, Sanballat from Samaria gave him Alexander 7,000 fighting men, allowed Greek temples, called him brother, so his oath was accepted. And Sanballat then said his son-in-law Manasseh was a brother to the high priest Jadis, and that there were many other wanton Greek temples in places subject, and it would divide Israel as a nation. Archimedes was contemplating a mathematical diagram when the city was captured. The Roman soldier commanded him to come and meet, but he declined, saying he had to finish the work. He was working on a problem. This enraged the soldier. The Roman soldier killed Archimedes with his sword, where his last words are recorded as, "Do not disturb my circles." Studying when disturbed by the Roman soldier. Then as finding the volume by floating on the level water, the gold rises versus silver, Archimedes then took to the streets naked, so excited by his discovery that he had forgotten to dress, crying, "Eureka! I found it." And when it gets twisted, the priest, like the priestess, they found the creation and not the supernatural creator, because nothing can't come from nothing. It's got to be something. When the tools came to life, he believed the tools was answering the call. He was wrong. He misunderstood the knowledge being gifted to him, and his successor does the same. And then the long stringy thing. Big old hole for the asp hole, flexible curve. Priestess of Peneus, the modern counterpart of the lesbian. Lésbos. It's historical, yeah. This character. In relation to this character. In relation to these characters. Looks like swimming to me. Spearfishing. That's some slopgollion, slumgollion, everything in between. It's your whaler before whaling was cool. These Lésbos nymphs. Here you can tell this is one variety of person. Similar helmets. You could say that's a style. But in this case, with this particular scene, it is this variety of philosophy. The helmets vary and change. Imagine riding in on a rhino. That's what I want to do. I'm coming in on a rhino with a trident the size of walrus, stomping on crocodiles, just busting it up, riding in on a rhino. You know, you ride a horse and carry a swan, looks like you got wings riding. You know, they said people that had them names, and then people that were good on their feet and their horse, and people just were their horse. They were attached to their horse. And then the people that were good on feet might have got